He don't talk right anyway. So welcome to Don't Talk Right podcast, episode 5. Today I'm talking to Andy N. Andy is a poet, author, journalist, promoter, musician, composer, I think just about anything. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Randy. I do like to also add as well, I do occasionally sleep.
every now and then, maybe one of those power naps, I think.
Yeah,
so do you want to talk, just start talking a little bit about your background, where you come from and what you've done up to now?
Yeah, well, we could be here for a while with that, but people know me. But yeah, right back at it. Pardon me. I started writing when I was 10. I know it's a common cliche, but I've still got those poems, and I'm one of these sort of people that I'm very organised about, and I've got like all my very early works into little, I know modern ones as well, into hardback A5 books, and I've got about 60 of them. Would you believe? And it's got plays in them, some better than others, songs. I've been in a number of bands over the years, lots of poems, and nowadays flash fiction. And then I've been in a number of bands, like I said, and I also have co-run a few spoken word open mic nights, and I've co-run at the moment called Speakeasy.
So I'm kind of intrigued by this idea that you were able to keep all of these writings, because I've written things all my life and promptly lost them. I mean, I have almost nothing. There were floppy disks full of things that I lost. There were scrapbooks of things I lost. So I've lost almost everything. So it's amazing that you're able to hang on to it all that. You still revisit those things and develop them, or
some of the very, very early ones are impossible, to put it honestly with you. I can remember the first poem when I was 9. It started with blue is the colour of the sky, red is the sun, and I thought, or yellow is the sun, and I thought, I can't go back and improve that.
Well, yes, no, I take your point. But however, a lot of people do like memoir, and when you read something you wrote when you were 10, even if it's The Sky Is Yellow, you might read, it might take you back to the situation you were in at that time. Why were you writing about that and develop it? Because I'm sure a lot of your writing is based on those memories, I would think.
Yeah, definitely is, because it's a lot of it is my pieces they're often my memories, and a lot of it really is constantly looking back, because I do live a busy life anyway. But when I was younger, certainly with 20s and 30s, I travelled a lot, really travelled a lot, and always like, and that sort of open mindedness really has come through with the music I listen to really as well, because certainly when I was growing up, my dad got me listening to a lot of Scottish bagpipe music and 60s and 50s and 60s rock and roll. Because I caught you out the other day when I was saying I love Robert Gordon and Link Wray's 2 albums. Yeah. And I saw Link Wray, and he's like, I think it was last tour in England, 97. Incredible it was. But and then I went into like stoner rock, and I love bands called Spaceman 3, and I love classical music. I adore reggae music and ambient music, everything really.
Yeah. And Robert Gordon, of course, just died this week.
Yeah, tragedy. But I'm saying that actually, he's had a good life, mind yourself. Respect to him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw Link Wray as well on the last 2 times around. I saw him, and he was scheduled for a 3rd round, and my son wanted to go, and I told him I didn't feel like going, and then he died a couple of months later. So
dear,
I haven't lived that one down yet with my son. Haven't been
incredible.
So in those early days, you were writing poems and other things and keeping them in notebooks. Were you a musician already at that time?
Oh no, that came much later, because what's less known about me is obviously I've done a number of bands in the last 10-15 years, but I actually formed the first band actually, which like a goth rock band in the early 90s, and we were called Beyond Midnight, I seem to recall it was. Got no recordings, I've just got the lyrics. And I used at the time, I had a 26-inch hip, so I'd wear these 24-inch high leather pants. I had a massive wig on, face completely goffed up. And the lyrics are basically very bad rip-offs of Joy Division.
So you're not revisiting You're not revisiting those lyrics now.
Oh no, I get sued. I'm surprised we didn't get sued at the time, to be honest with you. I've wrote about it because I've got an autobiography and I'll release someday. And that's got several chapters about some of the awful gigs we did. And some of the good ones as well.
Well, in the 90s is when you said you were traveling a lot, right?
Yeah, I did. I always worked in my life, various jobs, but I worked when I was younger. I used to make sure every weekend I was out traveling and just covering everywhere I could around England, really. I always had an interest in traveling.
So was the travel wasn't work related though?
No. At the time in the 90s, I was working in a catalogue firm, actually, as a public relations assistant.
Oh.
And then I used to use that money to, obviously, when I was living with mum and dad, I used to just every chance I could go out place, travel constantly.
Right, I understand. Yeah. Sarah, when I met Sarah, she was working in oil and gas and was only home. She lived in Houston at the time, was only home about 1 week a month. So our early relationship was us going out a couple of times and me saying, see you in 3 weeks. So.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. I think I'm always a believer, if you only got one life, really, haven't you? So you've got to live it, really.
Well, that's what they say, is that at the end of it, people remember and value their experiences, not the things they had. So
yeah, that's why I look at it. And those books for me, because I've got them on my bedroom, in a massive plastic container, and like it's just my life. Right. It is like, as I said, some of the pieces that I've certainly got better as a writer as I've grown older, but the memories are there, and I think that's what you're looking for a lot of the time. It's a journal.
No, I think so. Bailey White, you may not be familiar with her. She's a Southern American writer. She's excellent, but I I watched a little talk she gave, and she was talking about people who say, where do you get all the ideas for these stories? Because her stories are kind of a little bit out there, some of them, and she said, oh, I'm a intelligent, creative person, I make up all these things. And so she said she went back and started reading the stories and was like, oh, well, that was my uncle and that was this guy who, lived in. She said, I didn't make up any of those stories. She sort of did this confession. As you get older, you get more honest about that, I think, but it is important. I mean, and having a record of all the things you went through it gives you such a treasure trove, really, to just, you could provoke a story probably at any moment by opening those.
Yeah, that's what they are, really. You're right about it. I think the older I've got as a writer, and this includes everything I do, really, I'm probably better at hiding it to some degree. So I'm nowadays writing more flash fiction and then poetry, and I've got a novel on the way as well. But like the characters are me, but you have to look more carefully to discover what's me and what's truth sometimes.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen you read a number of things, stories and poems both, and you sometimes do this disclaimer, but I think frequently we don't believe the disclaimer, because you're saying this isn't actually about me, and we're going, I think maybe that was about him, but sometimes. But you leave it ambiguous, so we don't know, and we're not going to ask too many questions, right? It would be rude to dig too far.
Yeah, the saying they always use is leave the audience guessing.
That's right. No, I think it's fantastic, and opening up, forcing the audience. Well, audiences are going to wonder if it's autobiographical anyway, but then just teasing them with it a little bit, and it gives more tension, I think, to the audience to experience.
Yeah, no, you did right. You did right with it. So it's just called being clever sometimes, and I'm probably too clever for my own good.
Well, no, it's great stuff. How's it different writing, say, a poem or writing a song? A similar approach, or?
Yeah, it is. I think it's quite a similar process for me, really, because I can remember when I said I've fronted a few reasonably successful bands and managed to do gigs quite regular, and it's a common myth, really, when you do songs. Like all it is a poem, but you put a chorus in the middle of it, and I think that's completely. It's not a lot of the time, because a lot of it for me is when I'm doing songs, I was trying to work out the music or that goes with the words. I've done it before now when I've had a poem that ended up becoming a song.
Well, sometimes I've written poems that I thought had a fairly regular meter and regular rhyme scheme, and if I actually tried to fit that meter into a song, I realized it wasn't nearly as regular as I thought, you know, and I had to take words out and add words and everything else to try to make it scan properly.
Yeah, I think that's a problem sometimes, a lot of that sort of stuff. Certainly when I was writing more poetry than I do nowadays, I've always tended to write a set meter anyhow, really, because you saw us on my old band, actually, or part of it, we did a one-off for your night, actually, in Stockport, where he said means to an end. And all our pieces were, I used to have Jeff telling me all the time, get the meter right, you've got too many words in that stanza. So it used to be like, that's what we used to do, really, like, just by being aware of it. Obviously, from a poem as the first of all, and then as I got older, most of my pieces do have meters in them anyway, so I can usually get around it.
Right, yeah. It takes a bit of effort, because in a poem, I think if the meter is too regular or the rhyme scheme is too regular, it sounds very trite. Whereas in a song, it doesn't sound trite. It sounds like it needs to be that way. So it is a different approach, I think.
And the other myth one is that's come up, and this has come up in the last 3 bands I've been in. They've all three guitarists said this, and Jeff was one of them. Whereas when you're looking at poetry, and because I've not got the greatest voice. When I was younger, I could really scream, and I really could scream. But nowadays, I just try and make sure I keep the voice constant. As you're looking at it, really, it's like if you try and do it as poetry, but then it becomes a song. A song sometimes could argue is a colorized version of a poem with music filling it out.
Do you frequently think of sound and color?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because I do a lot more like ambient music nowadays, and I've just released an EP from a new band actually as well with a young lady called Polly Ocean, and that was me using the keyboard a lot more and looking for layers constantly to build over the top of Polly's words, because she's an incredible vocalist. She's like a spoken word of Grace Jones, and her voice is that rich. And it's trying to not get the chords there, trying to amplify everything and make it sound twice as powerful, I think, half the time.
Right. Definitely. Some of your music that I listened to, either either it didn't have any words at all, or it had very sparse words, and so you're not always bringing poetry or lyrics either to the music.
Yeah. I think every piece you do, this is because I have done a lot of music under the name of Ocean and Bottle nowadays, and that's my ambient noise band, really. But when I'm doing that, most of the time, it's setting off, just do it as instrumental. And then I know by the end of the piece sometimes whether it needs that vocal touch, and it's gone the other way from what I used to do previously, I must admit.
How's it? I was just wondering how it's different. I mean, we talk about you as songwriter, but to me, it seems like a difference. It seems like this is just musical composition, which I somehow separate musical composition from songwriting. I don't know if you also do that.
Yeah, I do. I think I get me with it. Like I get approached sometimes to do bits and pieces of people, and I'll then sit down, usually on a Sunday afternoon normally, because the day job nowadays is longer hours. But I will sit down and have a think about things, and often it's the improvisation that gets me sometimes. But I'll have a chord in mind, I'll play on the keyboard, and then I'll be building layers on top of it, and then I can work out, I'll know as it's developing whether the lyrics are going to come with it, or I need, say, Polly's lyrics, or I do some work with Amanda sometimes as well, my wife. So there's no set pattern really in anything I do, and I think I like it that way, really.
Right. Yeah, just let it unfold. Are you primarily a keyboardist, or do you have other instruments that you?
No, I'm a keyboardist nowadays. Definitely a keyboardist. I do have a habit when people see me around sometimes. Do you know what field sounds are, or field recordings are?
No.
That's where I've not done it as much recently. I've been busy, but sometimes I was going to woods and stuff and forests and take a voice recorder and record nature.
Right.
Then put that into one of the pieces sometimes, just to give it that extra layer sometimes, and use that as the start passing point of a composition.
Oh yeah, that's excellent. Very good stuff. What else was I going to ask? Yes. good, what do you look for when you're looking for a good poem, a good song, or anything? What qualities do you think make it better or worse? Or
yeah, well, as usually me, it's always got to have something that makes me want to start a piece. It's a trigger point usually, and always is. I've got to have the first paragraph, stanza. It's got to really want me to carry on writing it. And I think the hardest point is getting the ending right in anything you do. It's by stories, poetry, prose, flash fiction. Somebody do like a set of flash fiction recently Unite for we invited Jeff on stage with me, and they were all fairly quick pieces to write, but it's because when I started it I knew where the piece was going. Poems and songs can be much more trickier pieces to me sometimes, because I can get 3 or 4 stanzas or verses in. I'm sat there thinking, how the heck am I going to finish this?
Yeah. I this is all from my memory, so I might get names wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was John Irving I saw once giving a talk on writing, and he said he wrote, I think, the last sentence first anytime he wrote a story or his novels or anything, and then he wrote toward that point, so he always knew where he was heading. He wasn't necessarily saying that's how anybody else should do it, but he just said it was something he did.
Yeah, I know 1 or 2 novelists that do that, and short story writers. That before they even start plotting the story, they will get that last paragraph right, and then they get the first paragraph right, and then try and get the C to in between it to match up. And I think sometimes it's great if you've got a set pattern in mind for that, but it's probably because I'm too much of a free spirit sometimes, where because I do so much, and I do. I train my brain. I'll just go with the flow half the time and let the muse dictate me, as a good word.
Right. Yeah, I don't think anytime somebody says this is the way to do it, they're really just saying what worked for them.
Yeah, no, definitely.
There's no guarantee it's going to work for anybody else. It's interesting, the idea, because I mean, as a writer, you want to sort of hook people in to something so they'll continue reading, but it sounds like you do that to yourself. You have to get yourself hooked in to continue writing it.
Yeah.
But I guess if you want
sorry, Randy, you always look at the writers as their own worst critics, aren't they? Or even creative people are.
For sure. Definitely, I would say so. So who are some of your favorite writers, songwriters, writers, anything, influences, I guess we'll say?
Okay, yeah. Writers wise, yeah. Certainly my favorite novelist is a good gentleman called, you've probably heard of him, called Paul Auster, who was most famous for doing the New York trilogy. And Paul Auster was a massive influence on me, because he's one of these sort of art writers that he's done literally all kinds of mediums. He's done novels, done plenty of non-fiction, done a book of poetry. He's also wrote songs. I can't sing that, I believe, but his daughter can, Sophie Auster. So he's done a couple of songs with her and directed films. And he was a major writing influence, and I got him to like 25 years ago, because it made me think to myself, don't have to stand still with my creativity. Music, oh blimey, I could be here a while with that one. But I said before to you, currently I'm loving the Beverly EP, where he's instrumental dubstep. But I do love a band in Manchester called the Chameleons from the 80s. And I do love a lot. I love a lot of local music as well. And already, I love Joe Ely. I do love Link Ray. And I'm also a massive Michael Martin Murphy fan as well. So I grew up with a lot of country music, and it's a big help that Amanda's a big fan of that music as well. So, but then I listen to Kevin the Bug Martin, who's hardcore, and I've got all kinds of influences really.
I was wondering, because when you were very young and you started writing, who were you reading when you were 10 or 11 or 12, and who were you listening to at that time, if anybody?
Yikes! Music-wise, I can't remember. It didn't start to come to me a couple of years later. That I remember loving poetry. I got into when I was a bit older. Really, I was just writing it. A lot of it came from school, read school prompts, and I certainly hadn't read much. I do remember loving Tennyson at school, and I do remember like some Robert Browning as well. But I used to listen to read a lot of pulp science fiction, Harry Harrison's Stainless Steel Rat series, and my dad got me into a pulp Western writer called Louis L'Amour. And I love his stuff because I love the characters. He's such a good character writer in the West. But a lot of it started off with quite gentle stuff like that, and I've got perhaps more complicated material. I like more the older I've got, really.
When I was 11 or 12, I think I read this Alfred Hitchcock series of mysteries, which was probably similar to like the Louis L'Amour. I always I came from Texas and I hated anything with a Western theme, so I never read any Louis L'Amour. Although, you know the song Drunken Poets Dream it's written by Ray Wiley Hubbard and Hayes Carll. Anyway, one of the lines is paperback books by Louis L'Amour are scattered across the floor. So
that's fantastic, lad. I didn't know that one, but
well, we did it one night, Sarah and I thought, is anybody here going to know who Louis L'Amour was? And probably they didn't, so it's too bad you weren't there. Maybe maybe in December when you come we can do it.
Don't tempt me. I'd love to hear it, definitely. So but but I said to you, on creativity itself, really, right, and reading stuff. I'm always reading all kinds of things, really, to be honest. And half time is getting, I'm sure you're the same, it's getting time to read sometimes. The older you get, because you just seem to run out of time, I think, sometimes.
I shouldn't confess this, but the older I get, the less I read, actually. Well, I read a lot, but it's mostly news and I read essays and things. I don't read nearly as many novels and things as I've gotten older. I had to read so many for school and everything. And there was the point for a while, I said, okay, I'm not reading anything for a while, but I didn't really stick to that either. But now something has to be quite compelling before I'm going to invest my time. But I do still love poetry. But I think that's one reason I'm moving more to songwriting, because I noticed that even when I was tired of reading novels and even poetry books, I'm still listening to great songs and looking for a great line in there, and it just seems much easier. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, as writers, we've always got to be constantly evolving. Anyway, like I said, I've said it several times already now. But like I said, but nowadays I'm writing more flash fiction, really, and poetic prose and actual poems. So, and if you'd asked me that 15 years ago, I would have probably laughed at you. But it's not the way it goes.
It's hard to admit that we're part of, as the modern world develops, that we have less and less time and shorter attention spans. And so it doesn't take as long to write flash fiction or to read it, so you can pick up a story and finish it right then. You don't have to come back to it. So I think it's a great genre that sort of evolved with the times, and it's good to see it. And they're short enough. I mean, I like that piece that you did with Jeff, but you can kind of take flash fiction and a musician and just sort of throw some music behind it that gives it a different mood or whatever you want to. I mean, I kind of like doing that. And
that was a difficult piece, that one, actually, to write, actually, I must admit.
Yeah. And I've noticed that if you get up and read, the people who are willing to sit and listen and pay attention are usually other writers. But if you have a guitar or something, people will come in off the street and listen to it, even though it's the same words. I found that kind of fascinating, because when we play at Petersgate, if somebody has a guitar, people from downstairs will come upstairs and listen. But if they're just reading poetry, I don't see people doing that very often. So
it's true. If you look, I don't know if you noticed it on that night. Also, I'm back talking about your night here in a bit, but was when Jeff came up to help me out with that piece. I must have counted about 5 phones coming out, either filming it or taking pictures immediately. Was you dead wrong?
Yeah. So it's a good thing. It's an interesting thing, and I like seeing that. I guess I kind of have the same bias because I read intermittently, but I listen to music continuously. Really,
it's the same.
So it's just one of those things. Other favorite songwriters?
Very good. I do love them. I forget where he's from. Marty Robbins, this 50s and 60s country singer, has a really guilty pleasure. I'm a massive fan of my own. And obviously, I like Joe Ely, and I'm just going to flick now. An unusual one I've been listening to recently, and I don't know how to pronounce the name of this, is Anisha Nin, who was a French erotic writer in the 60s and 70s, because I just got hold of an audio book of hers, and it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Also, massive fan of Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska. Nebraska.
Very good stuff.
And my dad's trying to get me into Buddy Holly at the moment, actually.
Well, you can't go wrong with Buddy Holly.
Exactly so. But I'm just looking. I'm trying to remember now. Do you like Niels Frammen, who's a German electronic piano player? He's incredible. And I said, and also got a big love in the North Manchester band Purescence as well. So, so, and I could probably sit down and think about loads of folk bands, but I'll put a bit more thought into
that. Well, it sounds like I'm not familiar with all the names you mentioned,
but some are more known than others.
But it sounds like there's not necessarily like the algorithm wouldn't be able to say Indian likes this, and just feed you a steady stream of similar stuff. It sounds like it's quite diverse and eclectic.
Yeah, I think I've always been that way. That's down to my dad, really. Certainly growing up, my dad he listens about 4 or 5 genres of music. He does. He's 87 now, and he's still like that now. But I surprise him sometimes when I tell him I'm listening to this kind of music now. He just looks at me thinking, really?
Well, yeah, the biggest surprise to my family was when I started listening to some country.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I never would listen to. I was very anti-country music when I was young. It was.
Oh, it's really interesting that sometimes where like you're rebelling, aren't you? Like that was probably your punk rock phase, and I think when you get a bit older, sometimes it's where I'm not saying you're accepting it, but you can look at it with more thoughtful eyes, can't you? Sometimes, I suppose.
Well, I grew up in Texas, which I didn't fit in well with, and the country music to me was right-wing, intolerant, bigoted, violent. And basically, people who listened to country music were the people who would either physically assault me or threaten to physically assault me on a regular basis. I very much didn't like it. And I spent a fair amount of time in rural East. I grew up in Houston, but spent a fair amount of time in rural East Texas, which was even more dangerous for people like me. So, but then I found kind of the alternative country people, who were like me. I mean, if you listen to Ray Wiley Hubbard talk about how he wrote Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mothers, it was basically the story of him getting beaten up in West Texas.
Oh, whoa.
And so I definitely related to that story. And so then I found out I could listen to those kind of alternative country people.
Yeah, I think you probably found with a lot of these alternative ones that they've always been there. Well, I think it's took the country industry, who use the word for it, time to catch up, really. I used to love Nancy Griffith growing up, and also Steve Earle as well. Like those very different.
Those guys from the 70s. I mean, Steve Earle, Guy Clark, Joe Ely, all the Flatlanders and Ray Wiley Hubbard, all those guys in the 70s were doing this stuff. I just didn't know about it. So I was listening to punk rock and reggae and anything not country. And then when I discovered them, my family was quite shocked to see me listening to country music. So.
Excellent.
But you also grew up. Manchester has quite a history of great songwriters. Did you grow up in Manchester? I never actually asked.
Yeah. I'm born and bred in Stretford, which is like South Manchester. So
right.
I live in Denton nowadays, which I moved from South to East Manchester, but I've always been around this way. Yeah.
So I mean, you had Bee Gees and Joy Division and all kinds of great people from Manchester.
Yeah. I've met some of them over the years as well. So, like I said, some of the musicians. I'm not going to name names because some I love the music, but they're not very nice people sometimes.
Yeah.
But like I say, you're right. I did grow up a lot in that Manchester scene, really, because I think I started going to a lot of concerts during the Manchester area, really, in the very early 90s. And some of the bands were definitely more better than others. And That's for sure. But you're right of it. Manchester's always been very vibrant, taking music scene. But I think at the moment we're heading back that way again as well. It's getting really, really vibrant out there at the moment.
Yeah. No, I since I moved here, I miss the music I left behind. But if I left here, I would miss the music that's here as well. Because there's a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of great stuff in this area for sure.
No, you definitely are. And I think it's just so much going on. Like, and I love the fact where you can just go to a local pub, can't you, and sit down, and listen to a band play. And they're going to be like usually really good.
Great bands, great songwriters. Yeah, very impressive, and a supportive scene there for them too.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities to get out there and do stuff.
Yeah, the same place too, like you said, we both said, the spoken word scene in Manchester at the moment, because there's so much going on and there's nights constantly getting formed, and it's not as like it was where just music cropping up everywhere. There's everything. It seems really, really high for activity at the moment. It does, and you're right, it's so supportive.
Right. I think this would be a good way to wrap up the podcast, actually, would be to have you sort of sum up, because you are a big promoter, I think, of anybody I've seen. You're more supportive of a larger number of people than anybody I've seen. I mean, you really do a lot to promote the whole writing scene in Manchester. Why don't you just talk about sort of your work and what you're doing and where people can find it, and then we can kind of.
Yeah, sure. Okay, to date I've done 6 full-length poetry books, and I've got the 7th one, which is due out. I'm trying to sort it out now, called Dock Leaves. You can find me on Amazon, Randy N, and I'm also on Instagram. Yikes, I can't remember what it was now. I think it's Andy N. I'll tell you now. It's actually under Andy N Poet on Instagram, and you can find me on Twitter as well. Podcasts I do, the big one is called, which we've both been hinting at, is Spoken Label. That's where I'm always chatting to writers, poets, artists, creative people, primarily from the northwest of England. But you know yourself, Randy, I've been chatting to loads of people from America, Canada. If I find someone that interests me, I'll talk to them. Do a podcast to Amanda called Reading in Bed, which is a book review podcast, and there's others as well. But we've got a supernatural one on the way in the new year, but you'll see that in the new year.
Very good.
That's on all the usual mediums. That's me.
And then Speakeasy.
Oh, of course, Speakeasy, yes. Speakeasy is spoken word open mic night. I co-run with Amanda and still excellent Steve Smythe. Is on the first Thursday of every month at Dulcimer in Cholton. If you want to ever read, get in touch and I'll go for the booking process with you.
Very good, Andy. Thanks a lot for
pleasure,
joining me today. And it's good to see you.
You too as well, man.